December 26, 1776, 4 a.m. George Washington stands on the Pennsylvania side of the Delaware River watching his army die. Not from British bullets, from cold, from hunger, from the simple, brutal mathematics of survival. Behind him, men leave footprints of blood in the snow. Not metaphorical blood, actual blood, from feet wrapped in rags because there are no boots left. The Continental Army isn't marching anymore. It's limping toward extinction. 6 days. That's all Washington has left. In 6 days, every enlistment expires. In 6 days, these men, what's left of them, can legally walk away. And they will. They've earned it. They've watched their friends die of dysentery in fields. They've retreated across New Jersey like beaten dogs. They've lost New York, lost Long Island, lost every major battle of this impossible war. The British aren't even chasing them anymore. They don't need to. Winter will do the work. Time will do the work. The Continental Army is collapsing under its own weight, and King George III's generals are already planning their victory parades for spring. If this story is hitting you, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. Because what happens in the next 6 hours is the only reason you live in a country called the United States. If Washington fails tonight, if this desperate, half-frozen gamble collapses, there is no second chance. There is no America. There's just a footnote in British history books about a rebellion that died in the snow. And right now, at 4 a.m. on the day after Christmas, that footnote is exactly what the world expects. Washington stares across the black water of the Delaware, ice chunks floating like tombstones, and makes a decision that will either save a revolution or bury it. He's crossing. Tonight. All of it. The plan is insane. Not risky, not bold. Insane. Washington has 2,400 men left. That's it. The Continental Army, the entire military force of the American Rebellion, has been reduced to fewer soldiers than a single British regiment. Most of them are sick. Most are starving. Some are literally barefoot in winter. And Washington wants to take this broken collection of farmers and shopkeepers, load them into boats in the middle of the night, cross a river filled with ice, march 9 miles through frozen darkness, and attack a garrison of professional Hessian soldiers on Christmas night. His own officers think he's lost his mind. Henry Knox, Washington's artillery commander, a former bookseller who learned war from reading about it, looks at the plan and sees a massacre. Nathaniel Greene sees desperation. John Sullivan sees the end. But Washington sees something else. He sees that the Hessians in Trenton just celebrated Christmas. He sees that they're drunk, warm, and convinced the war is over. He sees that the British command is so confident they've won that they've scattered their forces into comfortable winter quarters across New Jersey. Most importantly, Washington sees the calendar. 6 days until the army disappears. If he waits, he loses. If he retreats further, he loses. If he does nothing, he loses. The only move left is the one that shouldn't work. So at 6 p.m. on December 25th, as families across the colonies sit by fires pretending their revolution isn't dying, Washington begins loading his army into Durham boats, flat-bottomed cargo vessels designed for hauling iron ore, not soldiers. The water is 33 degrees, ice floes hit the boats like fists. Men grip the sides with hands already numb. The boats sit low, dangerously low, and every man knows that if one tips, the frozen water will kill them in minutes. The plan is to have everyone across by midnight, then march 9 miles, then attack before dawn. 4 hours for the crossing, 2 hours for the march. Attack at 5 a.m., still dark, still hidden. It's a perfect plan, except nothing works. The ice is thicker than expected. The boats move slower, the current is stronger. Men jump into waist-deep water to push boats off ice jams, and when they climb back in, their clothes freeze to their skin. Midnight comes. Half the army is still on the Pennsylvania side. 1 a.m. comes. They're still crossing. 2 a.m. Still crossing. Washington stands in one of the boats, watching his perfect plan disintegrate into chaos. Officers are shouting coordinates into the darkness. Horses scream as they're forced into boats. Artillery pieces, 900-pound cannons that shouldn't be crossing a frozen river in the middle of the night, are being loaded onto vessels that crack and groan under the weight. At 3 a.m., Washington does the math. If they finish crossing by 4 a.m. and march 9 miles, they'll reach Trenton at sunrise. Sunrise, when every advantage of surprise evaporates, when his exhausted, frozen army will be visible to Hessian sentries, when professional soldiers will have time to form ranks, load muskets, and cut down the Continental Army in an open field. Every general knows you don't attack at dawn. You attack in darkness or not at all. Washington has one choice: turn back, save his men, watch the revolution die quietly, or keep going. At 4 a.m., the last boat touches the New Jersey side. Washington gives the order. March, 9 miles, in darkness, in cold that turns breath into ice, over roads that are less roads and more frozen mud carved into ruts by British supply wagons. The Continental Army begins to move, except it doesn't move like an army. It moves like a funeral procession. Men stumble, men fall, men get up and stumble again. The column stretches and breaks and reforms. Officers whisper commands because sound carries in frozen air, and one shout could alert a Hessian patrol. Washington splits his force into 2 columns. Greene takes one route, Sullivan takes another. They'll converge on Trenton from 2 directions, squeeze the Hessians in a pincer. If both columns arrive, if neither gets lost, if the timing works, it won't work. At 5 a.m., the planned attack time, they're still 3 miles from Trenton. Men are collapsing. Some sit down in the snow and refuse to move. Officers drag them up. Some don't get up. The muskets are useless, completely useless. The flintlock mechanism, the thing that sparks and ignites the gunpowder, is soaked. Every weapon in the Continental Army is effectively a club. Washington's men will march into a professional military garrison with wet muskets, no bayonets, and frozen fingers that can barely grip a trigger. Sullivan sends a runner to Washington. "Sir, the ammunition is wet. The muskets won't fire. Should we turn back?" Washington's response is 3 words: use the bayonet. They don't have bayonets. At 6 a.m., the sky begins to change. Not sunrise yet, but the black is fading to deep blue. In 30 minutes, maybe less, there will be light. Enough light for Hessian sentries to see an army approaching. Enough light to end this. Washington is riding alongside the column now. He can see faces, boys, most of them, too young to be here, too cold to care anymore. Some are crying. Some have stopped feeling their feet. One soldier sits down and starts taking off his frozen jacket. An officer stops him. "What are you doing?" "I'm done. I can't." The officer looks at Washington. Washington looks at the soldier. "Get up." The soldier doesn't move. "Get up. We're 6 miles from ending this war. Get up." The soldier stays sitting. Washington rides closer. His voice drops. "If you sit here, you die in this snow and no one will remember your name. If you walk 6 more miles, you get to tell your grandchildren you saved a country. Get up." The soldier gets up. At 7:45 a.m., the lead elements of Sullivan's column spot Trenton. The town is silent. Chimneys smoke, no alarm, no drums, no movement. The Hessians have no idea they're about to be hit. But the sun is coming. The sky is lightening from blue to gray. Washington can see his own breath now, can see the faces of the men around him, which means Hessian sentries will see them too. He has minutes, maybe less. The army is exhausted. The weapons don't work. The plan is 3 hours behind schedule. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Washington looks at Knox, at Greene, at the officers around him. No one speaks, because everyone knows this is it. There is no retreat. There is no second chance. There is no version of this story where they turn around, cross the Delaware again, and try something else. The Continental Army is in Trenton, and the sun is rising. 8 a.m. The sun breaks over Trenton, and Washington has 6 hours of darkness left in his pocket, except he's already spent them. The attack was supposed to happen in black night. Instead, it's happening in gray dawn, that terrible in-between light where nothing is hidden and nothing is clear. A Hessian sentry sees movement. He squints, raises his musket, opens his mouth to shout. Henry Knox's artillery opens fire. The sound is apocalyptic. 18 cannons, 900-pound monsters that shouldn't have crossed the Delaware, shouldn't have survived the 9-mile march, shouldn't be here at all, erupt simultaneously. The frozen air shatters. Windows explode across Trenton. Hessian soldiers pour out of houses in their underwear, half drunk, completely confused. They're not supposed to be under attack. The war is over. Everyone knows this. The Americans are finished. The Americans are starving in Pennsylvania, waiting to disappear. The Americans don't attack on December 26th after the worst military campaign in history. Except they do. Sullivan's column hits from the south. Greene's column crashes in from the north. And the Hessians, professional soldiers, veterans of European wars, men who've fought for money and survival their entire lives, cannot form ranks. They can't organize, they can't find their officers, they can't understand what's happening. The Americans are everywhere, running through streets, firing from corners. Knox's artillery is tearing through buildings, through formations that haven't formed, through the fundamental assumption that this battle was impossible. Colonel Johann Roll, the Hessian commander, a man who's fought in a dozen wars, runs outside in his nightshirt screaming orders. His men are trying to assemble, trying to load muskets, trying to remember their training. But the Continental Army isn't fighting like a trained army. They're fighting like men who have nothing left to lose. A soldier with bloody feet charges a Hessian position with a musket that won't fire. Another uses his frozen rifle as a club. Others just scream, raw, primal sounds that don't belong in professional warfare. And the Hessians break, not retreat, break. Roll tries to rally them. Form ranks, form ranks. He's shot, falls. His officers try to organize a counterattack. Knox's artillery obliterates them. The battle, if you can call it that, lasts 45 minutes. 45 minutes to capture 1,000 professional soldiers. At 8:45 a.m., Hessians are surrendering in clusters, throwing down weapons, raising hands. Some are crying, some are still drunk. All of them are trying to understand how an army that was supposed to be dead just killed their war. Washington sits on his horse in the center of Trenton, watching his officers round up prisoners. His men, these frozen, starving ghosts, are looting Hessian supplies, finding boots, finding food, finding blankets. One officer approaches Washington. "Sir, the British garrison at Princeton will know about this by noon. We should retreat." Washington doesn't move. He's staring at something in the distance, smoke rising from Hessian campfires that will never be lit again. "We're not retreating." "Sir, we're not retreating. Not anymore." The officer waits. Washington turns his horse toward the Delaware. "Send word to every colony. Tell them we won. Tell them the Continental Army just captured 1,000 Hessians. Tell them we're still alive." He pauses. "Tell them we're still fighting." The sun is fully up now. The gray dawn has burned away into cold, clear morning. And for the first time in 6 months, the Continental Army isn't running. They're standing. In 6 hours, Washington crossed a river that should have killed his army, marched 9 miles through conditions that should have broken them, attacked a professional garrison with weapons that didn't work, and won. Not because the plan was good, because failure wasn't an option anymore. The silence after Trenton is the loudest sound of the war. Not celebration, not cheers, Just exhausted men sitting in the snow, surrounded by 1,000 captured Hessians who still don't understand what happened. Someone hands Washington a captured Hessian flag. He holds it, feels the weight of it, and realizes this piece of cloth is going to travel faster than any army ever could. This flag will reach Philadelphia by tonight, New York by tomorrow, London in 3 weeks, and everywhere it goes, it will say the same thing. They're still alive. The British command receives the news on December 27th. General Howe, comfortable in New York, already planning spring campaigns, reads the dispatch 3 times. 1,000 Hessians captured by an army that was supposed to dissolve in 6 days. He orders immediate retaliation, send forces to Princeton, to Trenton, crush this before it spreads. But it's already spreading. Farmers in Pennsylvania hear the news and pick up muskets they'd hidden. Militias that disbanded in November reform in January. Men whose enlistments expired on January 1st. Men who earned the right to go home, sign up for another 6 weeks. Not because Trenton was a massive military victory, because Trenton proved something no one believed anymore, that winning was possible. Washington recrosses the Delaware on December 28th, takes his army, now carrying Hessian muskets, Hessian supplies, Hessian confidence, back to Pennsylvania. Then crosses again a week later, fights at Princeton, wins again. 2 victories in 10 days. The British abandon their posts across New Jersey, pull back to New York, redesign their entire strategy around an enemy they thought was extinct. But here's what the history books don't say enough. If Washington had failed at Trenton, if the crossing had taken 1 more hour, if the Hessians had been alert, if Knox's artillery hadn't fired first, the United States would have ended on December 26, 1776. Not officially. There would have been no surrender ceremony, no treaty signing. The Continental Army would have simply evaporated. Men would have walked home on January 1st. Washington would have retreated to Virginia. The British would have spent 1777 mopping up isolated resistance. And by 1778, the American Revolution would have been a memory, a failed experiment in self-governance that proved what every European monarch already knew. Colonies don't beat empires, except they did, not because of destiny, not because of inevitability, because 2,400 frozen men crossed a river on Christmas night and refused to accept that their country was already dead. Trenton didn't win the Revolutionary War. The war lasted 7 more years. There were bigger battles, bloodier battles, more strategically important battles. But Trenton answered the only question that mattered. Would there even be a war to fight? In 6 hours, between 4 a.m. and 10 a.m. on December 26, 1776, George Washington gambled everything on an impossible plan that should have killed his army. Instead, it created a country. Not because the plan worked, because when every logical option leads to death, the only choice left is the impossible one. And sometimes, just once in history, the impossible happens.